Our next speaker is Drew Dellinger. Where are you, Drew? Yay! So Drew is a wonderful human being. He is an internationally known speaker, writer, poet, teacher. He's lectured and taught extensively throughout the United States, throughout the UK, Canada, Australia. He's the author of an excellent book of poetry, Love Letter to the Milky Way. And his writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Cosmos Quarterly, Tikkun. Drew has lectured at numerous colleges and universities, and he's taught at Prescott College, Schumacher College, Naropa University, Oakland, the Sophia Center, CIIS, JFK University, and it was at JFK where he was associate professor and director of the program in social ecology. Let's welcome Drew.
So I was sitting in a classroom in Assisi, Italy, with one of the leading environmental thinkers of our time, and he was talking about the power of story. Quote, "It seems that we basically communicate meaning by narrative," he said. At least that's my approach to things. That narrative is our basic mode of understanding. In that summer of 1991, Thomas Berry was a 77-year-old sage, a Catholic priest, a cultural historian, a scholar of world religions, retired from teaching, but at the height of his intellectual and prophetic powers. His central focus was addressing the deep roots of the ecological crisis. As Berry spoke poignantly of what was being lost, the mass extinction of species and the accelerating devastation of the biosphere, Berry told us the difficulty that we're into has come to a large extent from the limitations and inadequacies of our story. And what we need, I think, and what we really have, is a new story. So last year was the 40th anniversary of Thomas Berry publishing this groundbreaking essay, The New Story, which originally came out in 1978. If you're only familiar with the version that's in the book, The Dream of the Earth, awesome. But The Dream of the Earth is published in 1988. Berry wrote and published that 10 years earlier in 1978. I think it's important to claim how prescient, how far ahead of his time Thomas Berry was when he wrote and published The New Story in 1978. So last year we celebrated the 40th anniversary of the publication of The New Story. And this year we're gathering in the year of the 10th anniversary of Father Berry's passing. And I'm struck by the fact that so much of Berry's vision, so many of his beautiful ideas, so much of his poetic insight and his challenging critique remains so incredibly relevant and resonant. So I just want to crank through some of the beautiful ideas. I've just got a brief amount of time with you, so I'm just going to jump right in. Beautiful idea of Thomas Berry's. Every being is a mode of the earth. Every being is a mode of the universe. To inhabit Thomas Berry's cosmological vision is to see the whole unfolding symphony of species as a unified bio-spiritual expression of the earth and universe itself, blossoming into self-awareness and celebration through manifold forms. And as Brian Swim has pointed out, when the eyeball evolves, the earth is seeing itself. When Jimi Hendrix, Mozart, and Nina Simone reached the heights of artistic genius, the planet is performing. This is a subtle but powerful perceptual shift from seeing the parts to seeing the organic wholeness. Every phenomenon on the earth is a manifestation of the earth. The cascading panoply of forms in the universe is a single, seamless display of cosmic creativity. The earth flies, swims, and loves when earthlings do. The galaxies write sonnets in the hearts of poets. So therefore, it follows from that humans are the earth and the universe, reflecting on and celebrating itself. This cosmological context that Berry's vision provides can renew our sense of the human and our role in the whole unfolding. Thomas Berry defines the human as that being in whom the universe reflects on and celebrates itself and its numinous origin in a special mode of conscious self-awareness. Another beautiful insight of Thomas Berry is the universe is a communion of subjects, and every being has rights. Another beautiful insight of Thomas Berry's, the universe is celebration. Berry once said, I see the universe as a celebration of existence in the variety and unity of its forms. That, to me, would be an overview of how to see the universe. That's one of my favorite ideas of Thomas Berry's. The universe is celebration. That a one-word synonym for the universe is celebration. Just last year, this writer from North Carolina named Hal Crowther wrote a collection called Freedom Fighters and Hellraisers, a gallery of memorable Southerners. And he has a great entry on Thomas Berry. He said, few writers have been so right so often as Thomas Berry. He said, there are few comprehensive critiques of the human enterprise that fit together as seamlessly as this restless Southern priest's. Crowther continues, what Berry was able to do from his position outside or at least at the margin of an imprisoning commercial society was to see the wide world and its troubled history with alarming clarity. He had satellite vision. In comparison to most of his 20th century contemporaries, it was a vision that elevated him like an eagle among burrowing rodents. Rodents is a bit strong, but I love this line. He had satellite vision. He had satellite vision. And so if we take this line from Hal Crowther where he says, few writers have been so right so often as Thomas Berry, then I'd just like to reflect on, in the last couple of minutes I have, what were some of the things that, well, here are three things. I think there's a lot more. There's so much in Berry's work. It's so profound and so dense. When Steve and I were first studying with Thomas Berry in 1991 in Assisi, Italy, he would go on these trains of thought that would just go from Vico to Confucius to Maria Gimbutas to Carl Jung to the latest book that Paul Hawken had just written. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Three things that Thomas Berry was right about. He was right about the power of story and the significance of narrative, worldview, and cosmology. This is really story's moment to shine. For those of you who've been involved in this work for a long time, you've probably noticed, as I have, that the story, narrative. What's the story? Who's controlling the narrative? The awareness of this, the significance of this has grown exponentially, particularly in the last 3 to 4 years. But even in the last 10 years. So here's an example. Here's just a small sampling of some of the books on story that have been written in the last 10 years. On the Origin of Stories, Evolution, Cognition, and Fiction. Shaped by Stories, The Ethical Power of Narratives. Wired for Story, The Storytelling Animal, Winning the Story Wars, Storytelling and the Sciences of the Mind, The Power of Narrative in Environmental Networks, Narrative, Race, and Ethnicity in the United States. We could go on, but this is just a sample of some from the last years. And story Berry was so clear on this. And it's really, it's almost approaching like mainstream awareness. The social justice organizer Rashad Robinson, who's the executive director of Color of Change, wrote in just April of last year, he said, quote, narrative is now a big buzzword in the field of social change. Some examples of this, in 2014, Naomi Klein wrote her book, This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate. In the index, there are 26 entries for worldview. She discusses worldview 26 times in that book, This Changes Everything. A more recent book, 2017 book from the British journalist George Monbiot, says, Monbiot wrote a book called Out of the Wreckage, A New Politics for an Age of Crisis, in which he talks about the principles and values that might constitute a new political narrative. And he includes a chapter called The Story of Our Times, and it has a subheading on the power of the story. So I think this is an indication that even these mainstream journalists, progressive environmentalists, but mainstream journalists like Naomi Klein and George Monbiot are tapping into the importance of narrative and story. I will say, and I like George Monbiot's book a lot, but it's missing a connection to the cosmos. It's like, here's the new political story for the human society. And he's such an environmentalist, but it's like there's something, and I'm sure he's probably familiar with Berry's work, but you get what I'm saying. It's still in this kind of anthropocentric genre, and it's not that connection to the cosmos itself, that mysterium tremendum, right? I'm kind of obsessed with these stone circles in Scotland and the British Isles. Think about people for 1,000 years, for 2,000 years straight, coming and doing the chants and the bonfires and the and the funerary rites. We need some mysterium tremendum, and we need a connection to the more than human realm. He was right about the importance of story and cosmology. He was right about the need for a new story. He said, he was so focused on cosmology. He said, my own thing, he told us when Steve Snyder and I, who's going to speak in just a moment, when Steve and I were studying with him in 91, he said, my own thinking has been to go back to a cosmological answer. He said, my own approach is not psychological. It's not sociological. It's not theological or epistemological. My approach is cosmological. So profound. So let me just wrap up by saying I spent about 19 years, studying with Thomas and spending time with him as I could. And toward the end of his life, I was beginning to work on my doctoral dissertation. And I told Tom that I was interested in trying to articulate some of the connections that I saw between ecology and social justice, between ecology, cosmology, and social justice. And I wish that that he had lived longer and I'd been able to share more of what I eventually discovered about the cosmological and ecological dimensions of Dr. King. But I was able to have one conversation with him in the early 2000s, and when I was just kind of getting into this research, and I was telling him a little bit about some of the things that Martin Luther King had said, such as the universe is on the side of justice. We have cosmic companionship in the struggle for justice, and I was talking about, the importance of linking ecology and social justice. And so I'll just leave you with this, some reflections that Thomas Berry made from 2002. He said, I think the basic issue is the extent to which the ecology movement and the social justice movement, how they relate to each other. So that's perhaps the most difficult issue at the present time, is how these relate. He said, cosmology is the foundation of justice. Berry said the cosmological order is the source of everything. He said, just as in religion, that there's a cosmic liturgy, in politics, it's a cosmic basis of justice. And then Berry said, that would be the ultimate binding force between myself and King. The recognition that the universe supports justice. It's amazing how profound King was in his thinking, Berry said. And then he told me, the idea of the soul of an age or the soul of a civilization is what you will be dealing with, because King wanted to change the soul of the modern world, not just technologically, not just to get higher wages or even to get physically improved conditions, but to change the inner world. That's why when he had that I have a dream thing, that was a vision and a soul type experience of a transformed world, Berry told me. Not a more mechanically effective world, but something different, something new. What we're faced with now, Thomas Berry said, and with King's ideas, what we're faced with is a change in the soul of our world.